Your contract is canceled immediately." Preston's voice sliced through the boardroom. The vice president of operations stood at the head of the table, arms crossed, radiating the kind of arrogance that comes from never facing real consequences. I looked up from my laptop, where lines of code scrolled across 3 windows. The security protocol I'd been monitoring was running perfectly. Green indicators across the board. The $510 million defense grid protecting Aegis networks and 17 Fortune 500 clients was humming flawlessly. "Excuse me," I said calmly. "You heard me, Miss Lawson. We're terminating your consulting contract, effective immediately. 15 minutes to pack and exit the building." The other executives wouldn't meet my eyes. Elena from legal stared at her notepad. Tom from finance studied his coffee. Only Vanessa, the CTO who'd brought me on, shifted uncomfortably. I smiled. Not a big smile, just a small, knowing curve of my lips. "All right," I said, and began disconnecting my laptop. Preston blinked. He'd expected arguments, tears, begging. Instead, I calmly wrapped my cables, packed my drives, and gathered my belongings from the conference room where I'd worked for 6 months. "That's it," he demanded. "No protests?" I stood, slinging my bag over my shoulder. "What would be the point? You've made your decision." "Damn right I have. This company doesn't need overpriced consultants who think they're irreplaceable. My team can handle everything you do." "I'm sure they can," I said pleasantly. His confidence flickered. Something in my tone registered, but he was too deep into his power trip to back down. "Security will escort you out," he announced, gesturing to 2 guards. "That won't be necessary." I walked toward the exit, then paused. "Just one question, Preston. Who's going to explain to the chairman why the entire security protocol disappears in 4 minutes? The color drained from his face. "What?" I checked my watch. 3 minutes 40 seconds now. The system I built has certain contingencies. A dead man's switch, you could call it. My credentials need to authenticate every 72 hours, or the entire architecture recognizes a critical security breach and initiates complete shutdown. Safety feature. Can't have unauthorized personnel accessing a $510 million defense grid. "You're bluffing," Preston said, but his voice had lost its edge. 3 minutes 10 seconds, but I'm sure your team can handle it. Before we continue, if you're enjoying this story of corporate karma and technical revenge, consider subscribing. We're working toward 5,000 subscribers, and having you here means everything. These stories of knowing your worth and watching arrogance meet reality are what this channel is about. Now let's get back to the moment Preston realized his catastrophic mistake. My name is Maren Lawson. Before that day in the Aegis Networks boardroom, most people in cybersecurity knew me as the woman who could build the impossible. I wasn't born into wealth. My father worked as a mechanic in Detroit. My mother managed a small diner on the East Side. They taught me 2 things that shaped everything: how to solve problems with whatever tools you have, and how to treat people with dignity regardless of their title. Dad used to say that a person who looks down on the dishwasher is the same person who will crumble when something goes wrong, because they've never learned to respect the system keeping everything running. I carried that philosophy through community college, through Michigan State, through Carnegie Mellon, and into every contract I took in the 15 years that followed. That empathy, that understanding of how systems work from the ground up, made me exceptionally good at my job. At Aegis Networks, my official title was Senior Security Architecture Consultant. What that meant was 6 months ago, their infrastructure had been hemorrhaging vulnerabilities. They'd nearly lost their 3 biggest clients, and Vanessa called me at 2 a.m. begging me to save them. I built them a security protocol from the ground up. Custom architecture, quantum-resistant encryption, AI-driven threat detection that could predict and neutralize attacks before they materialized. It was beautiful, elegant, and unprecedented. It was also entirely dependent on me. Preston had been against hiring me from day one. He'd wanted his brother-in-law's security firm, despite them being responsible for the vulnerabilities in the first place. When the board overruled him, I became a walking reminder of his failure. For 6 months, he'd been looking for a reason to fire me. He finally manufactured one during a budget meeting, convincing the VPS that my fees were excessive and his internal team could maintain what I'd built. He wasn't wrong about the fees. I'm not cheap, but you don't pay me for maintenance. You pay me for expertise that doesn't exist anywhere else. He was about to learn that lesson the hard way. "You're lying," Preston said, moving toward the laptop at the head of the table. "This is extortion. It's a security feature. I documented it in the technical specifications. Section 47, subsection C. Authentication protocols and fail-safes." Tom frantically flipped through a printed document. "She's right. It's here. System requires continuous authentication from primary architect credentials at 72-hour intervals. Failure triggers automatic lockdown to prevent unauthorized access. Why the hell would you build it that way? Preston shouted. Because you asked me to make it impossible to hack, compromise, or access without proper authorization. That includes internal threats, corporate espionage, hostile takeovers. The system doesn't distinguish between a security threat and you firing me on a Tuesday. It just knows I haven't authenticated in 72 hours. So authenticate? Eleanor practically screamed. I held up my laptop. With what credentials? You just terminated my contract. I no longer have authorization. If I logged in now, the system would flag it as an unauthorized breach and accelerate the lockdown. The room erupted in chaos. 2 minutes, I observed. Preston's face went from pale to red. This is sabotage. For what? Following the exact specifications in my contract, building the security features you paid for. I explicitly warned this system needed proper maintenance. That was in my proposal, the one you didn't read before firing me. Vanessa found her voice. Marin, please, is there any way to stop this? I'd always liked Vanessa. She was smart, competent, and treated people like human beings. There is, but it requires someone with root access to manually input the override sequence before lockdown completes. Then the system needs recalibration with new primary credentials, about 90 minutes, for someone who knows what they're doing. I'll pay you double, Vanessa said immediately. Triple. Whatever you want. That's not up to you, Preston snarled. I'm not rewarding this terrorism. Terrorism? I raised an eyebrow. I'm standing here calmly explaining the situation. You fired the person maintaining your critical infrastructure without understanding what that infrastructure does. 1 minute 30, I said, checking my watch. Preston lunged for the phone, jabbing the button. Get me Austin. Now, Austin was Preston's hand-picked IT head. Nice guy, but a systems administrator, not a security architect. Different skill sets entirely. Austin, conference room A immediately. Bring anyone who knows security protocols. Preston slammed down the phone and turned to me. My team will fix this. I hope so, because in 70 seconds, you lose access to the security grid protecting 18 major clients. When that happens, you're in breach of every contract. Most include penalty clauses for security failures. You're looking at north of $40 million in immediate liability, more if anyone gets hacked during downtime. Eleanor went green. She knew exactly what those penalty clauses looked like. The door burst open. Austin rushed in with 2 other IT staffers, looking confused and alarmed. What's the emergency? Austin panted. Security grid shuts down in 45 seconds. You need to access the root directory, navigate to authentication protocols, and input the override sequence. What override sequence? Austin asked, opening his laptop. The one in the documentation. Section 47, subsection C, Appendix 12. Kelly, one of the staffers, pulled up files. I don't have Appendix 12. My documentation only goes to 9. I looked at Preston. Did you distribute complete technical documentation to your team? His silence answered. Let me guess. You didn't want to pay for the extended documentation package. That was an optional add-on. That was $15,000 for a PDF? Preston exploded. That was $15,000 for 200 pages of detailed specifications, authentication protocols, override sequences, emergency procedures, and maintenance guidelines. 30 seconds, Tom announced. Marin, please, Vanessa said. Tell us the override sequence. I considered. Vanessa had been good to me, defended my work, treated me with respect. The override sequence is 32 characters. Randomized alphanumeric with special characters. I can recite it, but Austin needs to input it perfectly on the first try. One mistake and the system interprets it as a hack attempt and accelerates lockdown. Austin's hands poised over his keyboard. I'm ready. The sequence is Q7 Delta 99K pound sin omega. Wait, Austin typed frantically. How do I input Greek letters? Unicode, alt codes. What's the alt code for Delta? Kelly asked. 15 seconds, Tom whispered. You can't input it in time, not without the documentation specifying exact formatting. Preston looked ready to stroke out. You did this on purpose? I built a security system on purpose, yes. That's what you hired me for. You chose to fire me without understanding what you were firing. $5 million, Preston blurted. I'll pay $5 million. Right now, just stop this. You can't stop it. It's already in motion. But for $5 million, I'll fix it afterward. Done, whatever you want. 765, Tom counted down. Across the building, I knew exactly what was happening. The security grid would recognize failed authentication. Lock down external access, isolate internal networks, encrypt its own core protocols. The entire process would take 40 seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1. Every laptop chimed simultaneously. Error messages bloomed. Austin's monitor went dark except for red text. Security Protocol Alpha 7. Critical authentication, failure initiating protective lockdown, all systems securing. No, no, no. Austin frantically tried commands. Nothing responded. Kelly pulled out her phone, face pale. Alerts from monitoring. All client connections just dropped, every single one. The conference room phone began ringing, then Alina's cell, then Tom's, then Vanessa's. Through the glass walls, I could see the open office standing, staring at screens, voices rising in confusion. Preston slowly turned to me. For the first time, he looked genuinely afraid. "Fix it," he said. "Now." I pulled out a chair and sat down. "Let's talk about the terms of my new contract first." The phones wouldn't stop ringing. The entire Aegis Networks office descended into controlled chaos. People rushed between cubicles, gathered in worried clusters, frantically typed at keyboards that couldn't connect to anything. Alina tried silencing her phone, but it immediately rang again. She checked the screen and winced. Donovan Aerospace, asking why their security monitoring went dark. "Tell them it's a temporary technical difficulty," Preston said through gritted teeth. "They're a defense contractor. They don't accept temporary difficulties. Their contract requires 99.99% uptime. We're already in breach." Tom's phone buzzed. He read it and closed his eyes. "Monitoring Center reports all 18 client connections down. They're asking if we're under attack." "Tell them no," I said. Everyone turned. "This isn't an attack. It's the security system doing what it was designed to do, protecting itself from unauthorized access. Your client's data is safe, just inaccessible until the system confirms there's no threat. You are the threat." Preston slammed the table. "No, Preston. I'm the solution you just fired." Vanessa held up her hands. "Marin, what would it take to resolve this?" Finally, the right question. I opened my laptop and pulled up a document I'd prepared 3 months ago when Preston started making noise about replacing me. I'd hoped I wouldn't need it. "These are my terms," I said, turning the screen. "First, a new contract, not consultant, chief security officer with a seat on the executive board." Preston started objecting, but Vanessa cut him off with a freezing look. "Second, full authority over all security infrastructure and personnel, including it. Austin and his team are competent, but they need proper training and resources." Which brings me to point 3. $20 million annually for security operations, infrastructure upgrades, and staff development. $20 million? Tom sputtered. "You spent $510 million on a security grid you nearly threw away because you didn't want to invest in maintaining it. $20 million annually is 4% of that investment. It's a bargain." Alina read the screen. Point 4. Complete access to all board meetings and financial disclosures. "I can't protect what I don't understand. If you want comprehensive security, I need to know everything. Mergers, acquisitions, personnel changes, financial movements." "That's insane," Preston said. "You're asking for control of the company." "I'm asking for authority to do my job properly. Right now, your security is compromised because you made a personnel decision without understanding technical implications. That can't happen again." Vanessa's phone rang. She checked it, expression tightening. "The chairman?" The room went silent. Arthur Whitmore, chairman of Aegis Networks, was a legend. Built the company from regional contractor to global leader, notoriously demanding with zero tolerance for incompetence. Vanessa answered. "Hello, sir. Yes, we're aware. We're addressing it now." She listened, then pressed speaker. Arthur Whitmore's voice filled the room, measured, controlled, didn't need to yell to convey authority. "Someone explain why I'm getting calls from 18 clients asking why their security monitoring went offline. And why my own security system texted me that my personal network is in lockdown." Preston opened his mouth, but Vanessa spoke first. "Sir, there was a contract termination with unintended consequences for the security grid. We're working to resolve it." "Unintended consequences. Preston, was this your decision?" Preston's jaw clenched. "Sir, I made a budgetary decision to reduce consultant costs. I wasn't adequately informed of technical dependencies." "You weren't informed? We hired Miss Lawson at considerable expense because she's the foremost expert in quantum-resistant security architecture. What about that suggested her role was optional?" Silence. "Preston, I asked a question. The technical documentation was extensive. I relied on my team to—" "Your team that isn't in this meeting. Your team that can't restore our grid?" Arthur's tone could cut glass. "Put Marin on." Vanessa pushed the phone toward me. "Good afternoon, Mr. Whitmore. Miss Lawson, I apologize for this situation. I assume there's a solution. What do you need?" I appreciated his directness. "I've presented terms to Vanessa and the others. New contract, proper authority, and resources to maintain the infrastructure properly. Send them to my email. If they're reasonable, you'll have an answer within the hour. How long to restore the grid? 90 minutes from when I start. I need physical access to the server room and my credentials restored. Eleanor, restore her credentials immediately. Marin, I'm sending my personal authorization code to Vanessa's phone. Use it if you encounter resistance. I want a full report by end of day explaining what happened and how we prevent it from happening again. You'll have it, sir. Preston, my office tomorrow morning. 9 a.m. sharp. The line went dead. Preston looked like he'd aged 10 years. His power play had just exploded in front of the executive team, and now he faced a meeting with the chairman that would likely end with him updating his resume. Eleanor typed on her laptop. Credentials restoring, you should have full access in 60 seconds. Thank you. I forwarded my contract terms to Arthur's email. I looked at Austin. I'm going to need your help in the server room. You too, Kelly. Good learning opportunity. Relief flooded Austin's face. He'd probably been terrified he was about to be fired. What do you need us to do? He asked. Watch and learn. Next time something like this happens, and there's always a next time, you'll know how to handle it. The server room at Aegis Networks was in the basement, behind 3 security doors and biometric scanners. Under normal circumstances, one of the most secure locations in the building. Right now, with the security grid in lockdown, it was accessible only with Arthur Whitmore's personal authorization code. Austin and Kelly followed me through the checkpoints, past rows of server racks humming with controlled temperature and managed power. I'd spent weeks here when I first built the security grid, mapping every connection, understanding every dependency, building in redundancies and fail-safes. The primary terminal was in a glass-enclosed office at the center. I logged in with my restored credentials. Authentication confirmed, LAWSON, MAREN primary architect credentials VERIFIED lockdown status. Active awaiting instructions, the system is in protective mode. I explained to Austin and Kelly. Like a fortress that pulled up the drawbridge, everything sealed to prevent unauthorized access. My job is convincing it the threat is resolved and it's safe to lower the drawbridge. How does it know it's safe? Kelly asked. It follows very specific protocols. I verify my identity, confirm the authentication failure was resolved, validate no active threats, then manually restore each component in the correct sequence. I pulled up the diagnostic panel. Rows of red indicators showed every lockdown system. First step, verify identity. I entered credentials again, added biometric confirmation, scanning my fingerprint and allowing facial recognition through the terminal's camera. Biometric confirmation complete identity VERIFIED. LAWSON, MAREN primary architect status. Confirmed, second step, address the authentication failure. I navigated to the protocol that triggered lockdown and entered a command sequence telling the system the failure was resolved. Authentication failure acknowledged resolution confirmed threat assessment. Pending, third step, validate no active threats. This takes about 40 minutes. The AI scans every entry point, every client connection, every internal system, verifying nobody tried exploiting the lockdown to gain unauthorized access. Austin leaned forward. This is incredibly sophisticated. It has to be. We're protecting critical infrastructure for the largest companies and government contractors in the world. A vulnerability here doesn't just mean stolen data. It could mean compromised national security, disabled infrastructure, financial collapse. The stakes are existential. My phone buzzed. Email from Arthur Whitmore. Miss Lawson, your terms are acceptable with minor modifications to equity structure. Eleanor will send revised contracts within the hour. Welcome to the executive team. Arthur Whitmore, I smiled. Good news? Austin asked. I just got promoted. While diagnostics ran, I walked Austin and Kelly through the security grid architecture, building institutional knowledge so Aegis wouldn't be dependent on any single person. The core uses a 3-layer defense model, I explained, pulling up a schematic. The outer layer is the moat. It monitors all incoming traffic, uses machine learning to identify attack patterns, and automatically filters obvious threats before they reach the main network. Kelly took notes. How does it distinguish legitimate traffic from attacks? Behavioral analysis. It learns what normal traffic looks like for each client, time of day, volume, origin points, data types. Anything deviating significantly gets flagged for the second layer to examine. What's the second layer? Austin asked. The wall. Active threat detection, real-time analysis, response protocols. If something gets through the moat and the wall identifies it as malicious, it isolates the threat, traces it to origin, and deploys countermeasures. Countermeasures? Austin's eyes widened. Like offensive capabilities, purely defensive. We're not hacking back, but we can make attacking us extremely expensive and time-consuming. The system generates false data to waste attacker resources, routes them into honeypots that look real but are isolated monitoring environments, and dynamically shifts actual data. Like trying to punch someone who's constantly moving. Brilliant, Kelly said. The real innovation is the third layer, the keep. The inner sanctum where the most critical data resides. Even if someone breaches the moat and wall, the keep uses quantum-resistant encryption and multi-factor authentication, making unauthorized access mathematically impractical. Mathematically impractical? Austin repeated. With current technology, you'd need more computing power than exists on Earth and more time than the universe has existed to break the encryption by brute force. The diagnostic routine chimed. 43 minutes had passed. Threat assessment complete. No active threats detected. No unauthorized access attempt. System integrity 100%. Awaiting restoration sequence. Perfect. Now the delicate part. We restore each component in correct order. Wrong sequence could create vulnerabilities during transition. I pulled up the restoration protocol. Like conducting an orchestra, each instrument needing to come in at exactly the right moment. First, internal monitoring. This lets us watch everything else as it comes online. I entered the command. Red indicators shifted to yellow, then green. Internal monitoring, online status, nominal next client authentication systems. Doesn't reconnect clients yet, but prepares the grid to recognize them as legitimate when we restore connections. Client authentication, online status, nominal registered clients, 18 pending connections, 18 now defensive layers. Wall first, then moat. Reverse order because the wall needs to protect the moat while it's initializing. Austin watched intently. Why is the moat vulnerable during initialization? It has to briefly open all monitoring ports to establish connections. For about 30 seconds, there's a window where a sophisticated attacker could potentially slip through. The wall covers that window. The wall came online, then the moat. The security grid was functional, but clients remained disconnected. Final step, restore client connections one at a time, monitoring each as it comes online to ensure no issues. Why not all at once? Austin asked. Because if there's a problem with one connection, I don't want it cascading to all 18. We do this carefully and methodically. I started with Donovan Aerospace. Their connection came online smoothly, all green indicators, then Hartwell Financial, then Cascade Manufacturing. One by one, each client reconnected. My phone buzzed with notifications. Monitoring center confirming successful reconnections. Tom sending updates that clients reported security back online. Vanessa asking for completion ETA. 78 minutes after starting, the last client connection turned green. System restoration, complete all clients, online all defensive layers, active security grid status, nominal. Austin exhaled. We did it. You did it. I just showed you how. Next time something goes wrong, and there will be a next time, you'll know how to handle it. Kelly stared at the screens. This is beautiful. I knew what she meant. There was elegance to well-designed security, poetry in how pieces fit together. Not just keeping bad things out, but creating a system robust enough to protect itself, smart enough to adapt, resilient enough to recover. Back in the conference room, the atmosphere had shifted dramatically. Where there had been panic, there was now cautious relief. Vanessa stood as we entered. All clients reporting normal operation, confirmations across the board. Marin, I don't know how to thank you. Thank me by making sure this never happens again. Austin and Kelly need training, resources, and support. Agreed, already in the works. She slid a tablet to me. Your new contract. Alina expedited it. If you're satisfied, we can finalize by end of day. I scanned through. Chief Security Officer, board seat, full authority over security infrastructure, 20 million annual budget, equity package, and fair salary. One additional clause made me smile. Termination clause. Employee may only be terminated for cause by unanimous vote of full board of directors, with mandatory 90-day notice and complete knowledge transfer protocol. Arthur added insurance, I noted. He wanted to ensure we couldn't make the same mistake twice. Preston's meeting tomorrow will be unpleasant. I didn't feel particularly sorry for Preston. He'd tried firing me to satisfy his ego and nearly destroyed the company. But I wasn't vindictive. For what it's worth, I hope the board remembers everyone makes mistakes. What matters is whether you learn from them. Vanessa gave me a long look. That's generous, considering, I shrugged. My dad used to say holding grudges is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. Preston made a bad call. Maybe he learns, maybe he doesn't. Either way, I'm not wasting energy on anger. The next morning, I arrived at Aegis Networks at 7:30. My first official day as Chief Security Officer. Vanessa had sent me a calendar invitation for a 9:30 executive team meeting, which meant I'd be in the room when Arthur addressed Preston's future. I wasn't looking forward to it, but it was part of my new role. Before that, I stopped by IT, where Austin was already at his desk. "Morning," I said. "Got a minute?" "For my new boss, always." "Stop calling me that." "We're colleagues," he grinned. "Colleagues where one of us has executive authority." "Fair point. I wanted to talk about building out your team. I've got budget authority now. If you could hire 3 new people, what positions would you fill?" Austin blinked. Seriously, you know what gaps exist better than I do." He pulled up a document. "Kelly and I made a wish list months ago. We need a dedicated network security analyst for full-time monitoring and threat detection. Another systems administrator, because we're stretched thin on maintenance. And a database specialist because we're all generalists managing increasingly complex data infrastructure. Send me the job descriptions. I'll get them approved and posted by end of week." Just like that. Just like that. You can't protect what you can't maintain, and you can't maintain complex systems without adequate staffing. I spent the next hour walking through the building, stopping by different departments, introducing myself in my new role, asking about their workflows, concerns, and needs. Operations worried about integration between project management systems and security protocols. Finance wanted better encryption for client financial data. Human resources needed help securing personnel records while keeping them accessible. Every conversation gave me puzzle pieces. Security wasn't just building walls. It was understanding how people actually worked and making protections seamless enough not to impede productivity. At 9:15, I headed to the executive conference room. Most of the team was already there. Vanessa, Aliner, Tom, and several VPs I hadn't worked with directly. Preston sat at the far end, looking like he hadn't slept, his usual arrogance replaced by something resembling dread. I felt sympathy despite everything. He'd made a catastrophic mistake, but watching someone face consequences was never pleasant. At 9:30 exactly, Arthur Whitmore entered. Late 60s, silver-haired, impeccably dressed, with presence that commanded attention without demanding it. Everyone stood. He waved us back to our seats. "Thank you all for being here. I've read the reports from yesterday's incident. First, Marin, welcome to the executive team. I've reviewed your governance recommendations and will be implementing all of them. Vanessa will work with you to establish the security review board by end of month." "Thank you, sir. I look forward to it." Arthur turned to Preston. "Preston, I've given considerable thought to your role in yesterday's events. You made a decision that nearly cost this company hundreds of millions of dollars and multiple critical contracts. That kind of judgment error is unacceptable at the executive level." Preston's face paled. "Sir, I take full responsibility. I should have consulted the technical team before making any decisions about security infrastructure." "Yes, you should have. But the fact you didn't reveals a deeper problem, a fundamental misunderstanding of what leadership requires. Leadership isn't about asserting authority. It's about making informed decisions that serve the organization's best interests, even when those decisions require you to defer to someone else's expertise." The room was silent. However, I also believe in learning from mistakes rather than simply punishing them. "Preston, you're being reassigned to a special projects role, reporting directly to me. Strategic planning and business development, where your skills are better suited. Your compensation will be adjusted accordingly. You'll no longer have direct reports or budget authority." A demotion, but not termination. Preston would lose power and prestige, but keep his job, more mercy than many companies would show. "I understand, sir. Thank you for the opportunity," Preston said quietly. Arthur turned to the rest of the team. "Let yesterday be a lesson for all of us. We're only as strong as our weakest decision. Moving forward, I expect every executive in this room to seek input from relevant experts before making major changes. Marin's governance recommendations aren't suggestions, they're requirements. Clear?" A chorus of "yes, sir" went around the table. The meeting continued, covering normal business. Budget reports, client renewals, upcoming projects. I contributed where appropriate, mostly listening and learning the executive team's rhythms. When the meeting ended, Preston left quickly, avoiding eye contact. I felt bad for him, but sometimes the kindest thing you could do was let someone experience consequences of their actions. That's how growth happened. Vanessa caught up with me in the hallway. That could have gone much worse for him. Arthur is smart. Firing Preston would have been satisfying, but it wouldn't have taught anyone anything. This way, the whole company sees mistakes have consequences, but they're not necessarily fatal if you're willing to learn. "You're very wise for someone who just became an executive yesterday." I laughed. "I grew up watching my parents manage a small business. They taught me that how you handle problems says more about you than how you handle success." The next few weeks were a whirlwind. I hired Austin's 3 new team members, established the security review board, gave presentations to every department about security best practices, worked with Vanessa to upgrade infrastructure. But my favorite part was the teaching. Every Friday afternoon, I held security lab in the main conference room. Anyone from any department could attend. We'd work through real-world scenarios, practice threat assessment, learn about new technologies, and build a culture where security was everyone's responsibility. Attendance grew every week. People were hungry to learn, to understand, to be part of building something robust and resilient. 3 months after the incident, Arthur called me into his office. "I wanted to thank you. In the quarter since you came on as CSO, we haven't just improved our security posture. We've improved how this entire company thinks about expertise, collaboration, and decision-making. That's transformational. I'm just building on what was already here. You already had talented people. They just needed support and resources, which is exactly the kind of leadership this company needs." He slid a folder across his desk. "I'm expanding your role. I want you to take on oversight of all technical operations, not just security. CTO responsibilities in addition to CSO." I opened the folder. A promotion with corresponding increase in authority, budget, and compensation. That's a lot of responsibility. You've proven you can handle it. More importantly, you've proven you understand that technology exists to serve people, not the other way around. "That's rare." I thought about it for exactly 3 seconds. "I accept, on one condition." Arthur raised an eyebrow. "Which is?" "Vanessa gets final say on strategic direction. I'll handle the technical side, but I'm not interested in empire building. This works best as a partnership." He smiled. "I already discussed it with her. She suggested the same arrangement. You two are going to do great things for this company." I left his office with a new title, new responsibilities, and profound gratitude. Not just for the opportunity, but for the journey that brought me here. From my parents' diner to conference rooms where decisions affecting millions were made, I'd stayed true to principles I learned growing up. Respect everyone, build things that last, and never forget that expertise without empathy is just arrogance. That night, I called my parents to share the news. "CTO and CSO?" Dad whistled. "That's incredible, sweetheart." "It is, and it's terrifying. There's so much that could go wrong." "That's how you know it's worth doing," Mom said. "If it was easy, they wouldn't need you." "Just remember," Dad added, "no matter how high up you go, you're still the girl who helped me rebuild that '67 Mustang in our garage. The girl who worked summers at your mom's diner. The girl who knows that the person cleaning the floors is just as important as the person signing the checks." "I won't forget, Dad, I promise." And I meant it. Because at the end of the day, whether I was writing code in a server room or presenting strategy to the board of directors, the principles didn't change. Treat people with respect. Build things that last. Use your knowledge to lift others up, not keep them down. That was the legacy my parents gave me. And it was the legacy I intended to pass forward to everyone I had the privilege to work with and teach. Preston's attempt to fire me had been a blessing in disguise. It exposed vulnerabilities, created opportunities for growth, and ultimately made both me and Aegis Network stronger. Sometimes the best thing that can happen is someone trying to knock you down, because it gives you the chance to prove, to them and to yourself, exactly how strong you really are. And that strength doesn't come from being irreplaceable. It comes from building systems and cultures where everyone can thrive, where expertise is shared generously, where mistakes are learning opportunities, and where the measure of success isn't how much power you hold, but how much value you create for others. That was the lesson I learned from a $510 million security grid, a vindictive VP, and a 90-minute crisis that changed my career forever. And I wouldn't trade it for anything. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever felt undervalued at work or watched someone in power make a catastrophic mistake, I'd love to have you subscribe. We're building a community here, working toward 5,000 subscribers, and every person who joins helps us create more stories about standing up for yourself, knowing your worth, and understanding that real power comes from building others up, not tearing them down. Hit that subscribe button, and let's keep this conversation going.